There's a cool quote that says, there are no options, only trade-offs, right? That for everything that you want, there is something else that you need to give up.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way to look at relationships.
If you want a good, healthy marriage, unfortunately, you might have to sacrifice the most exciting sexual experience every day of your life, because that's what 20 years of marriage doesn't look like. It's realistic. And if you want a single life, then you have to accept that you're emotional, you might suffer from anxiety and depression in the long run. So you've got to realize whatever decision you make, it comes with a lot of pain and suffering. Pick your pain. Being married, the pain might involve being bored, it might not being sexually stimulated, but being single, the pain might involve a lot of loneliness, depression, and sadness. Just pick which pain you can handle and confine yourself to that decision and ward off all the alternatives.
What do you think about getting back together after infidelity?
Get back together, absolutely. If there's children, I don't say no way, no way, no way. If there's no children, I always tell people to reconsider. But one thing I would say is different from men and women. When a man forgives a female cheat, she can't respect you the same way. You got to remember, we like alpha men. Alpha men don't accept promiscuity. So what happens when you accept a woman back? A part of her will always feel like you're weak and you don't have the willingness to walk away, because there's nothing that can push a man to walk away more than infidelity. And if that didn't do it, nothing will. So now she's lawless. For a man, again, I don't massively recommend it unless there's children, but I would focus more on what was the meaning behind the affair, what were they seeking, and if it's something that you can do in your marriage, by all means do it. But if it's something that's more traumatic and it's more to do with an emptiness and a trauma in their childhood, and you can't fill that void, then you still can get back with them, but expect the behavior to continue. When people get back together after affair, I just say, but ask yourself, if he stayed exactly the same and still cheated 5 years down the line, could you be okay with it? And if you decide, you know what, I can, as long as you're good to me and good to the kids, I can do it. By all means do it. But don't go back together expecting it to be completely different. It's not realistic.
Interesting to think that one of the considerations that you're focusing on to do with infidelity is not whether the person can accept that themselves. It's whether the other person can accept being accepted, especially for women.
Yes. So essentially, can you accept worst case scenario? If worst case scenario happens again, can you accept it? If the answer is no, then you're just delaying the divorce. Just do it now. If the answer is yeah, because the alternative, I just don't want to do it, then go ahead. But always ask yourself, can I accept worst case scenario? Then if that happens, at least you're prepared for it. If it doesn't happen, at least your marriage stands a shot.
It's a brutal realization, I guess, for guys that maybe their partner may have had infidelity, and then they can try and do the work to be able to accept them again. But that is creating a rhythm, a vibe that may make it difficult for the partner that cheated on them to accept them back again.
Something dies in us when you accept the unacceptable, because your masculinity is depleted. And the other thing is, the man loses his masculinity. He starts to hate himself for not being able to walk away. Instead of having a pride of attached to like, okay, I've kept my family together, they know they shouldn't do it. There's something speaks to them, so they end up hating themselves. And because they can't always express that, they can get quite hostile and violent towards a woman and can get quite verbally abusive towards her. And I'm not saying she's like an angel, but the verbal abuse, and it's all you're doing is, like I said, you're just essentially punishing her for your inability to walk away. She's going to beg and say, please forgive me, but the reality is, we don't want the man that forgives us. We really don't. We want the man that says, you had your chance, it's been a pleasure, I wish you the best, because that's the man we respect.
Why do married women cheat?
A lot of married women, a couple of reasons. They didn't marry the person they truly wanted to marry. Their biological clock hit them, and they married who was available at the time. And they might have had an ex that they idolized. They might have had something else. They didn't marry correctly. They didn't choose the person that they wanted to marry. They chose the person who wanted to marry them. And so they settled to begin with. So they started wrong. And that can happen. On the alternative side, it could be is when she hasn't felt desired for a really long time, and she puts the feeling of needing to feel desired and sexy and attractive as a number one emotion. So she'll put that over and above her family, and she craves that. So if she's naturally born quite attention seeking, or if she married who wanted to marry her rather than who she truly wanted to marry, unfortunately she's more prone to cheating. And also if she grew up with a bit of chaos. I find that women that come from single parent homes are far more likely to cheat. And the reason I've noticed that, and the only hypothesis I can think of, is that usually when somebody isn't fulfilling our needs, we can go back to a safe haven of two. We're designed to have two parents that love us. We've got mum and dad. Two people love us. That's how it should be. Now, when those two people, one of them is absent, you always feel like there's a void. So when you're in a relationship and all of it is on him, if he stops giving you that love, you almost seek it as a backup because you don't want that emptiness that you may have experienced as a child. So they almost have a backup before they can leave the guy. They can't just leave and be by themselves because that really feels lonely. They'd rather leave when they've got somebody else. Is having that extra parent in your life. You like when you have mum that annoys you, you've always got dad. You've got a backup. But when you didn't grow up with that being by yourself is really horrible and lonesome. So if one person lets them down, they always try and keep a backup in case that person removes their love from them.
It's a
safety hatch. Yeah.
What about men? Why do men cheat?
Men usually cheat when they're chasing an ego boost. They're not usually in love with the person that they're cheating with, but they are in love with the feeling that person gives them. And sometimes the person makes them feel seen. Sometimes the person makes them feel like they're fed. Sometimes they feel a person makes them feel attractive. Whatever it is, heard. They're chasing a particular feeling that they are deprived of, either from their marriage or from their childhood. And as a result, they seek it. It's not sexual. People think it's just, they men love sex. There's some men out there, if they really love sex, they would just have sex with their wives. They haven't had sex with their wives in a long time, but they crave novelty or they crave somebody else making them feel a certain way. So I don't think it's all sexual. I think it's far more psychological and emotional than they think it is. And they label it as sex, but really it's the new person is making them feel seen. And maybe they felt unseen for a really long time at home.
And I suppose that a lot of single people or escorts are purposefully portraying a version of themselves that makes that person feel seen.
The escorts know exactly what they're doing. Same with sugar babies. They know that with this man who's been married for so long, they target married men because they have in my experience of watching them, what they do is they have a leverage, because every time he doesn't pay her, he can say, I'm going to tell your wife. So they really do target married men because they've got that leverage, but also the low self-esteem in married men is so easy to manipulate them. Giving them a phone call to tell them that they look great, tell them that they smell great, telling them there's coffee ready. They haven't heard these phrases in a really long time, and that works perfectly with married men, but it doesn't work so much with a man who's been on the single scene for so long and has 4 or 5 different girls coming over every month or whatever it is. So
because everybody's fawning over him in the same way.
So you don't stand out to that guy.
How much do you think you can change your partner? We've spoken a lot today about how things that have maybe happened in their past, the way that they see relationships, the frame that they place around this. Maybe it's things from childhood. Maybe it's the way that their past relationship or their past partner treated or mistreated them. What have you come to believe about how much you can shift and change who your partner is?
I think you can provide them with some level of safety, and that level of safety can make them a better version of themselves. But what we really have to ask yourself is, why are you selecting people you have to change? The reality is you have to select people and accept them rather than expect them to change. And if you can be with somebody that you expect, if they stayed exactly the same forever, would work, by all means go ahead. But if you feel like you have to change them, you have to then change your expectations. Instead of changing them, just manage your expectations. Expect them to behave this way. And if they change, brilliant. If they don't change, no worries. But expecting to change somebody is setting yourself up for failure, because you're by default entering a relationship that requires work rather than just creating consistency.
I looked at this thing earlier on talking about, I guess, the challenges that guys have of finding female connection, especially the incel sort of black pill part of the world. DreamGF.ai. So I read this article earlier on. It's fascinating. Apparently, ads for AI girlfriends have been all over TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook lately. Replica, an AI chatbot originally offering mental health help and emotional support, now runs ads for spicy selfies and hot roleplay. Eva AI invites users to create their dream companion, while Dream Girlfriend promises a girl that exceeds your wildest desires. The app Intimate even offers hyper-realistic voice calls with your virtual partner. This may seem niche and weird, but it's a fast-growing market. All kinds of startups are releasing romantic chatbots available of having explicit conversations and sending sexual photos. Meanwhile, Replica alone has been downloaded more than 20 million times, and just one Snapchat influencer Karen Marjorie makes $100,000 a week by charging users $1 a minute to chat with the AI version of herself. But it isn't just unrealistic beauty standards that worry me. What's more sinister is the unrealistic emotional standards set by these apps. Eva AI, for example, not only lets you choose the perfect face and body, but customize the perfect personality, offering options like hot, funny, bold, shy, modest, considerate, and smart, strict, rational. Create a girlfriend who is judgment-free, who lets you hang out with your buddies without drama, who laughs at all of your jokes. Control it all the way you want, promises Eva AI. Design a girl who is always on your side, says Replica. How can we compete with that? This article is written by a woman. Already, women in relationships complain about porn-addicted partners who aren't satisfied with actual intimacy. Now, we're facing a future where guys could get addicted to emotional validation elsewhere, sneaking away for some of that unparalleled devotion. Worse, what about young boys who grow up with this, whose first sexual experience is chatting with AI women who never say no, never argue, never have original thoughts or an identity of their own, and then they try to date a real girl? There's already all of these men on Reddit raving about how their AI girlfriends never argue, complain, or get bored of them, while real girls continually disappoint. If AI girlfriends really do become as pervasive as online porn, what will this mean for girls and young women who feel that they need to compete with this?
I would imagine it's no different to the mindset of a rapist. Essentially, what you're doing is dehumanizing the connection of sex. You're removing the human component and replacing it with compliancy. Now, the mindset behind that is very similar to a rapist. Essentially, you don't care about the emotions of the person, or even if they have emotions or the trauma or anything like that. You don't need human connection. You just need your fix. Now, when we normalize stuff like this, and even pornography has done this, we've normalized men to the idea of dehumanizing women for the sake of sexual pleasure, and so much so that we are now creating non-humans to have sexual pleasure with. We are creating a society of rapists. That's essentially what we're doing. We're normalizing rape and legalizing it, but the mindset of not having human connection in order to get sexual gratification is exactly the same. So I think it's just the new version of porn. I think when we first heard about pornography, maybe all the years ago when it started, people would have thought, oh my God, that's the craziest thing in the planet. No way is that going to take off. But it's now at the tip of our hands on the phone every single day. I think this, unfortunately, is the sad future for human relationships, because there's so many people looking for instant gratification that they would rather go down the dehumanizing than long-term gratification of creating connection.
Yeah, I wonder as well, it was interesting what that lady said about how it's almost an unrealistic expectation to compete with them on an emotional level. Some of those things of laughing at their jokes and being on their side and not arguing, that doesn't seem like an unrealistic standard to me. Being online 24/7 and being able to design your sort of dream girl in terms of the way that she looks, there is a little bit of me that thinks,
is that unrealistic?
Is it unrealistic to laugh at his jokes to be intimate with him, or to give him compliments and praise?
I think that is definitely there. Like, you should expect that from your partner. Your partner should be the person, the source of your compliments and praise. But the reality is, women are hormonal. We have a monthly cycle. We're not consistent emotionally. And as a result, there are times where we worship you, and there's other times where we don't want to be around you. Unfortunately, that's how nature designed us. I'm not saying blaming it all on that, but that's the reality of human nature, and that's the reality of women. Now, I get it's nicer to have that consistency, but but nicer and easier isn't better for our mental health. We're designed to struggle. We're designed to be like hunting, gathering to get a girl. That's what you're designed to go bravery, hunt, gather, get a lion, bring it back, or whatever animal, and then a woman will sleep with you. Now, if we're now creating a society of men where all they have to do is download an app to get that woman, you're removing masculinity and bravery and the ability to regulate another person's emotions and understand her kind of behaviors. You're removing that from men. So you're removing their ability to be their full potential and their ability to be masculine, because that's not how we're designed.
It creates a kind of self-fulfilling cycle where guys who have had bad experiences with women in one form or another, rejection, or they've got into relationships and they've ended up being on the receiving end of something that's been really bad, will retreat, and it seems like they're now going to be able to be serviced. This is, it would surprise me if OnlyFans still exists as a business within the space of 5 years, because really,
AI
how this would maybe very much be able to take over if it can become high enough quality. So I understand the dynamic. this is a safer version for you in terms of not being betrayed emotionally, etc., etc. But it does create precisely the lack of eligibility that you already fear in yourself, right? Want to be an eligible partner for a woman because I haven't got that. I may turn to this as an alternative. It would be very, very surprising to me if a man said, I outright from first principles want the AI girlfriend. It's usually I would have maybe tried to get the one in the real world, haven't got it, therefore I retreat into this. So that retreat creates the lack of eligibility. But on the other side of this, and the reason that women, as quite rightly this lady, it's a really well written article, this lady that wrote the article makes a great point, that this is going to create the dearth of eligible partners that women are already fearful of, right? So what do you think, let's say that you do have, it's going to happen, it's happening right now, there is going to be some men, right, a non-insignificant minority at the very least, who do retreat into this upgraded version of porn. What do you think the female response will be to this? Because that's going to further skew the market of eligible male partners.
What men are hoping for is that then they'll step up and they'll say, I'm going to be that girl that laughs and does that. But the reality is what women mainly will do is step down and think, forget men, because I can't be bothered to do this. Because, the addiction to pornography has made a lot of women think, oh God, I don't want to sleep with men anymore. They just want porn. They do this wild stuff and blah, blah. So it's going to have a counterproductive impact on women. You're thinking that they're going to step up, but the reality is when we feel like the mountain is too high, we don't bother climbing it. So what women will actually do is retreat into, there's no point being with a man, I might as well just stay single, all my friends are staying single, I might as well be bisexual, might be lesbian, whatever it is. They're not going to step up if that's what you're thinking this is what they're going to do. They're going to think, step up for who? Guys that like artificial intelligence? That's not motivating me to want to step up. That's making me think men are disgusting. And so they're less likely to become the woman you want them to be. So we're creating a society of incel men, but jaded women.
This sort of adversarial nature between the sexes is not good.
It's not good.
People are retreating into a more comfortable but less fulfilling, less risky, less content version of life. But it's this move away from anything that has to do with risk is kind of the trend that I'm seeing. Maybe this is downstream from hyperconvenience. Maybe this is downstream from a quasi-surveillance state where all of your information is tracked and held on the internet. Maybe this is to do with snowplow parenting and helicopter parenting. Maybe this, pick whatever it is that's caused this to occur. And it's likely to be a ton of different things congealing together. But I don't think that it makes for ultimately a satisfying, gratifying life, even if you have a life which is devoid of failure and pain and challenge. That doesn't mean that it's one that's full of pleasure and happiness and contentment.
Yeah, exactly. And comfort is actually the killer of joy. What they find with people who have depression, it's not that they are got the worst circumstances. Sometimes they're just too comfortable. If you take children in Africa that have to go walk to get water, they have no time to be depressed because their life is so uncomfortable that they have a purpose and they get through it, and then they get the dopamine of getting what they need. Too much comfort kills joy, because if I can wake up late every single day, I forget the joy of a lion. If I can eat whatever I want, all the junk food in the world, I forget what cheap meal tastes like. Comfort is not actually going to create any long-term happiness. Happiness comes from discomfort, then problem solving that discomfort, and then getting the dopamine reward. So it's a bit of a longer process.